Right. So in the previous tutorial, we have start implementing our HUD. So as the first step, we have added this weapon icon, right? So currently it's not updating on real time or whatever. It just stays there as a placeholder, right? So now let's see how we can actually update this weapon based on the weapon that we have been currently equipped. Plus, I think we need to have a better structure or better organization for each of these widget blueprints or widget instances that we have been used at the HUD, right? Then later on, actually, we can have much more modular way of updating each and every individual elements separately, right? Okay, so currently we have just added our widget like this at the BPC user interface system begin play. We simply created a widget instance based on this WB weapon widget blueprint class and add it to the viewport, right? So this is just a naive approach of adding a user interface element to your UI. But as I said before, we need much more modular and advanced way of handling each and every individual widget instances. So how to do that? Yeah. So first we can actually have a data structure called stack. So it simply populate whatever the instances within that stack, and we can determine what are the current element that we have, right? So let's create a widget stack. It is actually an array of widget, and later on actually we can use this data structure to populate the instances that we have within our HUD or UI, right? And then let's create a function actually to create this widget, right? So I'll promote this to a collapse to a function, and I'll call it as create weapon widget, and I'll assign it to a category called maybe create widget, and inside this widget let's promote this to a variable. So this should be a global variable because it should be able to globally accessible by any function within this instance. So let's promote it to a variable, and I'll call it as WB weapon, and assign it to a category called maybe widget references, right? So we have this instance here now, and then I'll plug it here and I'll unpin this link, and let's add that instance to the viewport, right? So this creation should happen only if we haven't created this instance yet, right? Because later on we may adding some features to instantiate or toggle actually our widgets multiple times. So if we have been already instantiated this instance once, we don't need to create it again, right? So to do that, actually we can first check whether this instance is valid or not. So if it is valid, we don't need to create it again. We can simply use the existing implementation or use the existing instance. Or in other way, if we have already instantiated this instance, let's say we need to keep update this instance whenever we create it another time. So we can simply remove it and place it again. Right. So for now, I think since we going to keep update this instance, maybe we can remove this instance and show it again. Right. So I'll remove it from parent if it is valid, but I have to check actually, like if it is not really required, we can remove this one. But yeah, for now actually it said remove from parent. So if it is valid, we are removing from parent. If it is not, there is nothing to be removed, so we simply create it again. Right. Okay. Right, so we have a function to create the widget, and then we need a function to actually toggle these instances as well, because later on I'm going to implement like weapon toggling features and stuff like that. So it would be nice to have a widget toggling feature here as well. So how to add that? Yeah, maybe I'll create a new function called toggle weapon, and I'll assign it to a category called toggle widget, and then I get an input whether it is visible or not, right? So if it is visible, then we are toggling it back, otherwise we are hiding it. Right. So since this is specific target for toggle weapon, I will get the WB weapon, and I have to simply check whether we have a valid reference or not. So if we have a valid reference, then I can set the visibility of this widget based on this one. So I'll add a select in here. I'll get to here. So if it is visible, then we show it. If it is not, then we can simply hide it. And if it is not valid, then we have to actually create the widget, right? Okay, that's for the toggling. And for the create widget, actually we haven't used this widget stack instance array yet, so let's add it here. So since we are going to add multiple elements for this widget, I think it's better to have a utility function dedicated for that specific adding part. So I'll create a new function called add to widget stack, and let's get this thing and add it like this. Okay. So this is say widget. Then going back to the create weapon widget function, so let's use this add to widget stack function, and as the input we can give it WB weapon reference, so it will be added to this widget stack. Okay. Right. And now at the beginning play, actually we are creating this weapon widget by using directly this function. It would be fine, But I think since we have this toggle weapon function, we can use it to have a better modularity, right? So let's use this toggle weapon function, and here I have the ability to whether it to make visible or not, right? So for example, let's make it visible, compile and save and play it again. Now you can see we have the weapon widget in our HUD as before. But for instance, let's say I don't want to show it, then I can simply toggle this thing to false, and if I play it again, oh, it's on the screen, which is wrong. Yeah, let's see why. Here is the reason actually. So if it is not valid, it doesn't aware of this creation part, right? So what we can do is if it is so we need the way to actually get the latest widget blueprint weapon widget reference. So let's go inside this function and let's add a return statement for this reference. So I'll call this as return value for now. And now we have the latest reference of our widget instance, right? And I can unpin this link and assign it to here again. Right, so if it is not valid, it will create an instance for us and return the latest reference, and then we can add it to here. Right, now let's see. Now we can see it can't visualize on the HUD, but if I toggle, sorry, I have to plug it again and compile and run. Still can see because I haven't plugged this link. Okay, so compile and save. Now you can see the widget, but if you toggle this back to visible, you can see it, right? But I'm just wondering, what if we remove this pin and instead of that let's connect like this, and let's see whether this instance is updated. Okay, it works for the visible part. How about hidden? Yes, it's working, right? So actually we don't need to get the latest instance as well in here, right? So I'll remove that link and I'll remove this return instance as well. It seems like a additional thing to do, right? So we don't need to actually do it like that way. We can simply have it like this. Okay, right, now the weapon widget can be toggled, right? So it's not visualizing, and if I make it visible, yes, it's on the HUD. Now actually we need a way to update this widget whenever we switch the weapon, right? So in order to do that, we need the way actually to determine what's the currently equipped weapon, right? So let's go to the WP weapon and at the event construct, let's the player character, and let's print and see whether it's capturing properly or not. Wait. Yeah, it's capturing. But instead of the player character, what if we get player pawn? Yeah, let's use player pawn because later on actually it might come handy. So I don't need this print statement now, but I need the player components instance for the weapon system. So you can see like inside the characters player, we have this weapon system that has been implemented to our weapon player character. So now similarly we need to get that instance, right? So BPC weapon system, and then we can actually simply check whether this one is valid or not. So if it is valid, then which means this actor component is exist within the player base actor. So if it is exist, then we need the way to actually determine the current weapon that has been equipped. So inside our weapon system, okay, we currently doesn't have a event dispatcher that has been added. Okay, so let's add a new event dispatcher, and I'll call it on selected slot changed, right? And as the input, I'll give the previous weapon slot, which is an actor reference, and new weapon slot, right? And let's go inside this equip unequip weapon. So similarly what we have been done at here, we can call this event dispatcher at here, and as the previous weapon, let's use rev weapon, which is this parameter, and as the new weapon slot, let's use new weapon parameter, right? So this will send a message via this call through this event dispatcher whenever we make the weapon switch. Now inside here, WP weapon, we can actually listen to that specific event. So if you search for onSelected slot change, there is an event called bind event to onSelected slot change. So we can use this event listener to listen to those dispatched events. So there, let's create the event, and I'll create a matching function, and I'll call it as the same name that we have been added there. So it should be on selected slot changed. So make sure that this is the event listener and this is the event dispatcher, right? The dispatched event will be listened inside here, right? So just for testing, let's add a print statement, and I just need to be aware of the new weapon or the current weapon that we have been equipped, right? So I'll print it here. So let's play. Okay, now you can see like it's printing like bunch of strings initially because it has been called for each time. But now if I try to switch the weapon, you can see it's printing whatever the current weapon that I have, which is good. So now Now inside our weapon instance, weapons base instance, actually we have this weapon config, where I config with the icon, which is basically the weapon icon that we use at the HUD. So now we need a way to actually access this variable so that we can update our weapon image dynamically, right? So since this is a actor object reference, actually it doesn't aware of these sort of implementations inside this weapon base. Therefore we have to cast for it, right? So let's cast for weapon base, right? Make sure it is weapon base because it is the parent actor that we encapsulated or that we inherited for each child instances of the weapons. So make sure it is the parent actor, which is weapon base. And then now we have the access for the weapon config, right? So I can break it and see what is the icon that we have, right? And we have the access for that specific instance. And now we need a way to actually dynamically change this image, right? So in order to change this image, we can make it as a variable, and I'll give it a name called maybe like image underscore weapon. And if I go to the graph, now I can see there is a variable called image weapon, which means we can use it for update our weapon image. So in order to do that, actually I will create a separate function maybe called update weapon image, and let's get this instance, and there is a function called set brush from texture, and I'll use that one, and as the texture I will make it as a parameter, right? Then I can use that function inside this onSelected.changed function, and as the texture I can pass this icon, right? Compile and save all. And now if I play it, you can see by default we have unarmed, and if I equip pistol, the image switch back to a pistol image. If I switch to rifle, it's a rifle image, and if I switch to sword, it's a sword, right? And that's work for increment, and similarly for decrement also it works, right? And you can actually toggle whatever the weapons that you require, and on real time the weapon widgets are, or the widget HUD instance are also updating. Okay, great. So one thing to note is like where these icons has been added. So if you go to one of the instances of this weapon base child instances actually, so for example if you go to the BP rifle, here I have been added those icons, right? So I think this stuff has been initialized in an earlier episode where we added this weapon actors to our TPS game. So in case if you missed that, go for it, go through that part, and if you just came along, make sure that icon and other metadata related to weapon has been initialized like this, right? Actually these configs inherited from the weapon base because our parent class are also inherited from the weapon base, right? So for example, like BP rifle is inherited from BP firearm weapon base, and if you go to that specific instance, it is inherited from BP weapon base. So inside the BP weapon base, actually we has this sort of configurations which are global variable that can be accessible by any sort of their child instances, right? Okay, so that's how we can add a dynamic UI for weapons, and let's improve this further in later episodes. See you there. Thank you.